It's an incredibly busy time in the garden at the moment, and most of the jobs are involved in the garden clearing, cutting back, and most importantly, pruning. And you find me here in the back of one of my large herbaceous borders. There's a layer of plants in front of me, and right at the back of the border is this decorative Sambucus nigra. This is a black cutleaf elder, much more easy to grow than, for instance, a acer, and much more tolerant of many different growing conditions. It's planted at the back of the border where it gets quite large with several roses in front of it. Lots of tropical plants around. I've got a banana off to my right, and in front of it, the very soft pink of the Queen of Sweden. A David Austin rose I have planted in a group of 3, and then a swathe of herbaceous perennials out in front of it. This particular plant is now 10 years old, and it's time to do some annual maintenance on this particular plant. This particular pruning tutorial is exactly the same whether you were working on Buddlejas, the butterfly bushes, or whether you were working on any of the cutleaf elder group, whether it's black, green, or golden coloured plants. The idea is you keep them young, you keep them vigorous, and you keep that lovely growth very vibrant and incredibly vigorous. And we do that by really hard pruning them. If you let these plants get out of hand, they're going to get really quite large. They're going to get really quite old and woody. And over a period of time, they'll start to drop limbs, especially Buddleja, as they get old and they get tired. The idea of this particular pruning tutorial is to show you just how to bring them into what we call a permanent framework, where we cut the plant back into a semi-permanent framework and then allow it to grow on every single year from there. So whether it's a Buddleja or whether it's a Sambucus, it's exactly the same principle. Most people create their permanent framework something in around a region of about 40 to 45 centimeters from the floor, around 18 inches from the floor. Mine here is a little on the taller side. We're more up to about sort of 1.2 meters, about 4 feet, because obviously we're at the back of the border. What you need to do when you're creating your permanent frameworks is actually calculate how large the plant is going to be when it flowers. The Sambucus, for instance, gets to about 5 feet before it actually produces any flowers. Obviously, the Queen of Sweden in front of this particular plant normally stands about 4 to 5 feet high, and I want this plant to be well above and fill up the space above it. So that's why I've calculated that my permanent framework wants to be at around 4 feet high. It's about twice the size it would normally be. Now, we do this to keep the plant young and vigorous and make sure that it flowers in the right places. Get loads and loads of messages from people who have bought Buddleja bushes, put them into their normally quite small gardens, and they say, oh my goodness, one, the plant has completely taken over the space, and secondly, all my flowers are 8 foot up. But if you actually cut the plant down every single year, Buddlejas and Sambucus like this will actually flower on new wood. They don't need to overwinter wood and bark like this to actually be able to flower. They'll flower on young growth. So if you prune the plant right down on an annual basis, your flowers will actually be in the right place at about 5 to 6 feet if you're cutting them correctly. Sometimes you're going to need a pair of loppers, but obviously doing this in this particular way, I only need a pair of secateurs, which obviously once again need to be kept sharp, they need to be kept clean, and you want to be making sure you're sterilising them between different plant groups, especially if you have any pest or disease problems in the garden. The idea of this is, as I say, to create a permanent framework. Sambucus is really easy to deal with, and you do this exactly the same as if you were doing a Buddleja, and we do this anywhere from the late part of January all the way through into the middle part of March, depending on your growing zone and depending on how cold it is where you are, and obviously how established the plant is. The younger your plant is, the more cautious you want to be, leaving it towards the latter end of February and into March. If you're like me, you've got a nice mature specimen, you can crack on and do that now. We've had nice weather over the last few weeks. We've had some cold temperatures, which has made sure that the sap in the plant is right down. And as you can see, the plant is already starting to think of budding itself up and actually produce leaves. Although these will sit here now for between 6 and 8 weeks, just biding their time, getting themselves ready for spring. So all we're going to do is we're going to just literally remove all of the stems from this particular plant. I'm going to drop the camera down just a little bit for you so you can see what I'm doing. So bear with me 1 second while I just drop you down. Hopefully that brings you in just a little bit closer. You can see my permanent framework is cut to here, and I'm now going to remove all of the growth back to a budded point. And you can see just here, I've got a pair of lovely buds. Sambucus produce their buds in pairs, one on each side of the stem, and then again 90 degrees, around 9 inches apart. So all I'm going to do is cut the stem nice and cleanly, remove that completely to a pair of nice strong buds. keeping my media that I'm cutting off all nice and tidy. And I'm going to simply work over this plant and simply remove the stems. I'm going to bring one in nice and close so you can see what I'm doing. You can see a nice pair of buds there. All I'm doing is bringing my secateurs in and cutting just above the bud. You want to leave yourself around 10 millimeters, about a centimeter above the bud, so you're not crushing it between the anvil and the blade of your secateur. I'm going to go over and completely prune absolutely everything off this plant now. It'll end up being clean. Hate using that phrase in the garden because gardens are never clean, but with this kind of pruning, you want them really, really clean and sleek, nice and tidy. All you should be left with is nice budded stems like this, nice and clear. Any diseased, dead or dying wood obviously needs to be removed at the moment as well, but you can see I've got quite a lot of growth to take off of this one. This is quite a substantial plant, so I'm going to crack on and get this pruned. This technique works exactly the same, say, for Buddleja and for all of the cutleaf elder groups. There's going to be a series of pruning tutorials coming from me over the coming weeks. I'm going to be touching base with you with apples and pears, and obviously continuing the rose pruning. You're still expecting a tutorial from myself on how to prune rambling and climbing roses. I'll be doing that over the next week or so. And of course, the roses we leave later on into the season, which are obviously the younger roses planted in the ground for less than 24 months. That tutorial will be with you very soon. Right, I'm going to crack on and get this task done and get on with some more work in the garden. I will see you all again very soon. Take good care now. Bye-bye.